Hi, Rashonda Cade here. This is Reading with Rashonda. We are reading The House Behind the Cedars by Charles Chesnutt. We are making our way. Look, this is how much we've done, and this is how much we have left. We are going to knock this thing out. Not today, but we will get there. I think I said it's probably like 15 more readings. I was trying to figure it out for myself, so please don't hold me to that. I was just thinking about how long readings are and how much we usually get through. I think, though, that today we'll get through this whole chapter. We are on chapter 26, The Schoolhouse in the Woods. Blanche Leary, closely observant of Tryon's moods, marked a decided change in his manner after his return from his trip to Patesville. His former moroseness had given way to a certain defiant lightness, broken now and then by an involuntary sigh, but maintained so well on the whole that his mother detected no lapses whatever. The change was characterized by another feature agreeable to both the women. Tryon showed decidedly more interest than ever before in Miss Leary's society. Within a week, he had asked her several times to play a selection on the piano, displaying, as she noticed, a decided preference for gay and cheerful music, and several times suggesting a change when she chose pieces of a sentimental cast. More than once during the second week after his return, he went out riding with her. She was a graceful horsewoman, perfectly at home in the saddle, and appearing to advantage in a riding habit. She was aware that Tryon watched her now and then with an eye rather critical than indulgent. She is grasping here. She's like, I'll take whatever I can get. That makes me sad. He is comparing me with some other girl, she surmised. I seem to stand the test very well. I wonder who the other is and what was the trouble. Miss Leary exerted all her powers to interest and amuse the man she had set out to win, and who seemed nearer than ever before. Tryon, to his pleased surprise, discovered in her mind depths that he had never suspected. She displayed a singular affinity for the tastes that were his. Of course she did. Come on now. She displayed a singular affinity for the tastes that were his. He could not, of course, know how carefully she had studied them. The old wound, recently reopened, seemed to be healing rapidly under conditions more conducive than before to perfect recovery. No longer, indeed, was he pursued by the picture of Rena, discovered and unmasked. This he had definitely banished from the realm of sentiment to that of reason. The haunting image of Rena, loving and beloved, amid the harmonious surroundings of her brother's home, was not so readily displaced. Nevertheless, he reached in several weeks a point from which he could consider her as one thinks of a dear one removed by the hand of death, or smitten by some incurable ailment of mind or body. Ere long, he fondly believed the recovery would be so far complete that he could consign to the tomb of pleasant memories even the most thrilling episodes of his ill-starred courtship. Wow, okay. Okay, you do you, Tryon. George, said Mrs. Tryon one morning while her son was in this cheerful mood, I'm sending Blanche over to Major McLeod's to do an errand for me. Would you mind driving her over? The road may be rough after the storm last night, and Blanche has an idea that no one drives as well as you. Aww. Why, yes, Mother, I'll be glad to drive Blanche over. I want to see the Major myself. They were soon bowling along between the pines behind the handsome mare that had carried Tryon so well at the Clarence tournament. Presently, he drew up sharply. A tree has fallen squarely across the road, he exclaimed. We shall have to turn back a little way and go around. They drove back a quarter of a mile and turned into a by road leading to the right through the woods. The solemn silence of the pine forest is soothing or oppressive according to one's mood. Beneath the cool arcade of the tall overarching trees, a deep peace stole over Tryon's heart. He had put aside indefinitely and forever an unhappy and impossible love. The pretty and affectionate girl beside him would make an ideal wife. Of her family and blood, he was sure. Is he? I don't know. Can you ever be sure? All right, of her family and blood, he was sure. She was his mother's choice, and his mother had set her heart upon their marriage. Why not speak to her now, and thus give himself the best possible protection against stray flames of love? So he's going to propose to somebody because he thinks that's going to extinguish the love he still feels for Rena. That's not how love works, boo. Blanche, he said, looking at her kindly. Yes, George. Her voice was very gentle and slightly tremulous. Could she have divined his thought? Love is a great clairvoyant. Blanche, dear, A clatter of voices broke upon the stillness of the forest and interrupted Tryon's speech. A sudden turn to the left brought the buggy to a little clearing, in the midst of which stood a small log schoolhouse. Out of the schoolhouse, a swarm of colored children were emerging, the suppressed energy of the school hour finding vent in vocal exercise of various sorts. So there are school kids out here screaming, "Rah!" because that's what kids do when they get let out of school. A group had already formed a ring and were singing with great volume and vigor. Miss Jane, she loves sugar and tea. Miss Jane, she loves candy. Miss Jane, she can whirl all around and kiss her love quite handy. The oak grows tall, the pine grows slim, so rise you up, my true love, and let me come in. I totally just made up that, but it sounded like something a kid might sing, right? Didn't it? What a funny little darky. What a funny little darky, exclaimed Miss Leary, pointing to a diminutive lad who was walking on his hands with his feet balanced in the air. Okay, okay, but fair. Kids do like to do handstands. At the sight of the buggy and its occupants, the sable acrobat, still retaining his inverted position, moved toward the newcomers and, reversing himself with a sudden spring, brought up standing beside the buggy. Howdy, Mash George, he exclaimed, bobbing his head and kicking his heel out behind in approved plantation style. Aw, you're free, and you're still doing things in approved plantation style, and I get it, because that's the way you need to act, and it's super sad. And he's already putting on, like, the minstrel show here. He's a funny little darky, and he's on his hands, and then he springs up in like a handspring, and howdy, Mash George. If that's not the way you were envisioning it, it's totally how you should be, because that's how it's written. All right. Hello, Plato, replied the young man. What are you? There are so many Black people named Plato in these books. Have you ever noticed that? Oh my gosh. Okay. Hello, Plato, replied the young, and I mean, Plato, let's not lose like who Plato is in real life, and that we have so many darkies in books named after Plato. It's an interesting kind of juxtaposition. Okay, sorry, I got carried away. I hear like drums in my head. All right, hello, Plato, replied the young man. What are you doing here? Going to school, Mass George, replied the lad, learning to read and write such like the white folk. What you calling that white man master for? Whispered a tall yellow boy to the acrobat addressed as Plato. You don't belong to him no mo. You're free and you got sense enough to know it. Tryon threw a small coin to Plato. That's probably why he's acting like that guy's his master. I'm going to get something out of it. Mind your own. None ya over here. Tryon threw a small coin to Plato and, holding another in his hand suggestively, smiled toward the tall yellow boy, who looked regretfully at the coin but stood his ground. He would call no man master, not even for a piece of money. Good for you, young man. I mean, Plato got the money, but you retained your self-respect. And I'm not even trying to lambaste people who have done and continue to do what they need to do. I'm lambasting the society that necessitates that. During this little colloquy, Miss Leary kept her face turned toward the schoolhouse. What a pretty girl, she exclaimed. There, she added as Tryon turned his head toward her. You are too late. She has retired into her castle. Don't forget the whole castle. So Tryon is on his horse that did him well, it said. So they were soon bowling along between the pines behind the handsome mare that had carried Tryon so well at the Clarence tournament. So Tryon is on his horse that he used at the tournament, and that's all knights and jousting and stuff. And so now Blanche looks at Rena, and we know it's Rena, but Tryon doesn't know that. Blanche looks at Rena and says, oh, what a pretty girl. She has retired to her castle. So we are very intentionally supposed to be thinking back to the days of where Rena and Tryon first met. He, the knight, she, the maiden in the castle. And again, he is the knight here and she is the maiden in the castle. Okay. What a pretty girl, she exclaimed. There, she added as Tryon turned his head toward her. You are too late. She has retired to her castle. Oh, Plato! Yes, missus, replied Plato, who was prancing round the buggy in great glee on the strength of his acquaintance with the white folks. Is your teacher white? That's an interesting question. I'm just like, that's the first thing you ask. Is your teacher white? Although looking at Rena, you would assume she is white. But like, is your teacher white? Because I'm going to classify your teacher in one of two ways, because clearly only white and black people exist. There aren't any, nobody else. No indigenous people, no people from any other place in the world. Everybody is white or black. Is your teacher white? No, ma'am, she ain't white. She's black. She looks like she's white, but she's black. Tryon had not seen the teacher's face, but the incident had jarred the old wound. Miss Leary's description of the teacher, together with Plato's characterization, had stirred lightly sleeping memories. He was more or less abstracted during the remainder of the drive and did not recur to the conversation that had been interrupted by coming upon the schoolhouse. The teacher, glancing for a moment through the open door of the schoolhouse, had seen a handsome young lady staring at her. Miss Leary had a curiously intent look when she was interested in anything, with no intention whatever to be rude, and beyond the lady the back and shoulder of a man whose face was turned the other way. There was a vague suggestion of something familiar about the equipage, but so the equipage is like the carriage, the buggy, and the horse. But Rena shrank from this close scrutiny and withdrew out of sight before she had had an opportunity to identify the vague resemblance to something she had known. Miss Leary had missed by a hair's breadth the psychological moment and felt some resentment toward the little Negroes who had interrupted her lover's train of thought. Negroes have caused a great deal of trouble among white people. How deeply the shadow of the Ethiopian had fallen upon her own happiness, Miss Leary, of course, could not guess. And that is that chapter. And that is our reading for today. I am Rashonda Cade, and this is Reading with Rashonda.